I'm Mo Golden and you're watching Art Kitchen. Today's interview is with Deborah Koff-Chapin, the creator of soul cards, soul touch coloring journals, and the touch drawing method that has been used by artists, art therapists, and intuitives for decades. Deborah holds workshops all over the US and sometimes abroad. Her annual touch drawing gathering on Whidbey Island is her deepest event, oriented to people who want to facilitate touch drawing in their own unique ways. Deborah has served on the board of the International Expressive Arts Therapy Association and has presented and made art at numerous conferences and events, such as the American Art Therapy Association and the Parliament of World Religions. You can find Deborah online at touchdrawing.com. This is the first of a two-part interview, so make sure you check out the second one as well. Thank you so much for coming all the way here and for agreeing to talk with me. And I guess my first question is about your kind of life history as an artist. Like, have you always been an artist? Have you always considered yourself an artist?
That does go way back in my identity. It really does. Some of my earliest childhood memories have to do with creating. Even one of the earliest is drawing a face. And I remember drawing the face, and I think there was a couple of family members there, so I was talking about it as I did it. And I was young. It was young. It was young developmentally, I think, to be drawing a face. And I actually remember that moment. I think it's a real memory, not just a reminded by family memory. So that goes, so that's an interesting thing that happens. So some of it's my own emergence, and then you also get, on top of that, the family projection of artist. So what is, original source soul, and what is family need and projection, they're all mixed together in a lot of ways. So then I became the artist of the family and all of that. So you got to sort through, is this real in me? Is this my own actual calling, or is it something they want me to do, for their own needs? And I guess we all grow up with some interesting combination of family and ancestral histories and longings, and our own soul chose to somehow be in that mix. Because there's actually, if we look back in our family history, there are not quite realized artists there, and so I think there is a stream that I'm a part of, and kind of embodying another level of actualization in the family line.
Interesting. And and that's been there for you since day one.
I guess so. Yes.
And how has your process changed through your lifetime, as well as your identity as an artist?
So I think it was a formative identity and has always been there, and and that came from a me and my own soul place, I think. In high school, for instance, junior high school, it was my place to source and resource and return to myself. And I was in high school during the late 60s when all the craziness was happening, and I think for me during those years, it was a place I could turn to find my own self, my own orientation, and release when I needed to. So there'd be moments I would do a painting, which was a way of dealing with whatever was happening at that time in my life and in the world. So it really became a sourcing place for me, creating paintings. I mean, I also did do theater, and I was in a very active choir, and so I did very multimodal artist. And I actually remember thinking about what art form does it really make sense to do? Because now I have to choose. If I'm going to go to college, I've got to choose which one, because there wasn't a place for intermodal arts at all, and there still really isn't, except in the therapy fields. But so I thought them all through, the different art forms, because I did theater pretty intensely for a while, although I was fading back on it. But the thought was, where would I have the most freedom to be myself? And it was visual art. Because I thought about, if I do theater, then you're subject to getting parts and all these other limitations. You can't just do it.
Yeah.
And so I do remember that being part of my process of choosing visual art as a path, because there was some kind of real creative freedom and independence to do whatever I wanted to do. Yeah.
And then so you went to art school.
I went to art school in New York City, and it was the 70s. Abstract minimalism, beginning of conceptual art. The abstract expressionists were being held up as gods, but the more minimalists were coming in. And
you were drawing faces.
well, I stopped.
Okay.
So in high school, I was drawing all these little people and figures and these little expressive from the inside of me things that is not so different from what I do now. But in college, it was like, all dissolved. No form, nothing to teach. No one knew what to teach even. I really feel like the structure, the curriculum was coming apart. It was like 1970. And the feeling I look back was they weren't sure even what to teach. So it was a very void kind of education. I think that had to do with the times.
Yeah.
And so a lot of my paintings were these giant things that I would kind of smush around, and just go into the void. And then they became these panels that I would change and move and flat color and sit back and look at them for, 20 minutes and make a teeny change. And I think there was actually something that created a foundation, a very contemplative, letting go of all form, getting into process, actually gave me a foundation into which touch drawing sort of came. So it gave me maybe fertile ground into which the seed of touch drawing could come.
Yeah.
So I think that actually there was value in it, even though it was almost anti-value. Like it wasn't like, what am I doing? What am I learning? And nothing. Okay, I got to be nothing, let go of everything, just sit and look, be, smush around. So
it's like a macrocosm of kind of the personal creative process in a way.
It was. And so when touch drawing came, there were seeds that were coming into that, so I'll call it a fertile void space of wanting to find images again that were meaningful. And I have written about this part of these different moments that were seed moments before touch drawing. Sometimes people say touch drawing, it was an accident, and it wasn't an accident. There were seeds, and then it emerged.
Yeah.
But because I did this little doodle, and I wrote, and it was in my last year, sometime maybe winter, early spring of my last year in school, what's wrong with drawing faces? Because there had been drawing from models, but it wasn't drawing human beings, it was drawing form.
Yeah.
It still had a different quality to it. And so I wasn't very excited or inspired by doing that. So what's wrong with drawing faces? And I did all these little doodles, and they were absolutely stupid and idiotic and banal little scribbles. And I tucked it away because it was like a dirty drawing to me. It was very embarrassing. And but I kept it, and I have found it, and I have photographed it, and I value it. So because I feel like in that moment I gave myself permission. Just to even do the doodles and to say, what's wrong with this? Something came alive, underneath, inside of me, in that fertile void. And, in my last day of school, I was helping a friend in the print shop where I had spent no time in the print shop. And all I was doing was cleaning up. And I put a paper towel onto this plate of ink to start wiping. And I played instead. And there's other little complexities around the background, but I moved my hands to the back of the paper towel. I picked it up, and the lines came directly out of my fingertips. And it wasn't just a technique. It was an energy opening, and that's what made it different. Because I have heard from time to time that in print shops, people will make a line with their fingertip.
Yeah.
No, I'm not the only person to have ever done that. But what happened when I did it was a very profound, energetic opening. And and a message and a knowing that this is a dynamic, creative, human evolutionary process.
Yeah.
And that's where my identity as an artist did change, because it wasn't only about doing my own art now, it was about serving this, you know, human evolutionary creative process, which I always felt that that's really what artists are about. They're about making a contribution to the evolution of consciousness, reflecting the times and being sort of the edge of that. And suddenly here I was with this process kind of dropped into this fertile void in my soul. And I got it. I got that it was this amazing process. It wasn't just a print shop technique. And the images came out of, you know, came like, kind of, my head opened up, you know. My energy was like an energetic opening. And I felt this energy moving through my fingertips and onto the paper. And it just looked like chicken scratch scribbles. But it also looked like nature.
Yeah.
It was natural, organic lines. And there were certain things even in the art world that would have supported that. There were people doing art that was looking like children's art, but it wasn't. There were people doing raw scribbles. It even had a component that was an evolution out of my art world experience. But so my art world experience did contribute a lot, even though I like to poo-poo it.
Yeah.
There was a value there. I don't know if I would have come to this if I hadn't gone through that.
I'm hearing two things that are like so important, I think, to highlight for other people in their processes that I just like hear. Like, one thing is like that, you know, that you had this profound experience and the product of it looked like scribbles.
Yep.
And that profound experience has been a lifelong path and career that I think so often we have those moments and then go, but it's ugly. Right. But it looks like scribbles. And to like be able to honor that and like relate to those scribbles as a souvenir of something important, and that it doesn't have to be beautiful.
Absolutely. And I find that, I mean, in teaching touch drawing now, people immediately, they want to have one day and be creating these ultimate things.
Where are my soul cards?
Exactly. That gets in the way. For years, I didn't even bring soul cards to my workshops because I didn't want people to see my work. And then I finally realized, wow, they're really cool to have the soul cards. They're a nice thing in a workshop. Other workshop leaders use them. Why can't I? But for years, I didn't, because people are so in this culture, they want immediate perfection. And you know, it takes time to cultivate anything. Yeah. And if we stop because we don't get immediate results, we'll never get anywhere. And it's certainly true of meditation. And I think people understand that more when it comes to learning a musical instrument. You don't just pick up a violin and play. You practice, you know? So I deal with that a lot in workshops now. And I see that, look, people move way faster than I ever moved. I did scribbly raw things for years. I mean, people move so fast into authentic, direct imagery, but have a little patience with yourself, you know? And because you'll probably be in a more profound way with the work. Establish a deeper root if you let yourself just open those channels and scribble and not be involved with the results.
Totally.
And I was just involved in our, we have these online, you know, Facebook groups, and I talked about my own experience with someone who was just starting touch drawing and was posting a lot, and I just shared my experience that, you know, when I first did touch drawing, hardly anyone saw it for a long time. And, you know, she heard me and she said, I did touch drawing this morning, and I was just saying, I'm not going to share it all, and it was so liberating to think I'm not sharing this with anybody. So it's okay to give that message to people. You don't have to show it. It's your own inner process. Value that. Someday you'll have something you want to show, very likely, but
to let that impulse be honest and natural.
Honest and natural, let it evolve to the point where it is something, you know, that it is appropriate setting and timing to share with other people.
And I just realized that the second thing I was hearing is the same thing, which is that you had this whole other identity as an artist, this whole other reality as an artist in art school, and that from the outside it's like, pop, you changed, and like, ta-da! but that whole process of becoming was not an accident or a different path. It was, that's what it feels like and looks like to be in a process.
Right. Yes, that's wonderful reflection, yes.
Yeah, and that sometimes, then we just like have our finished thing and it looks like it came out of nowhere, but it came out of all that uncomfortable, messy stuff.
Giving myself permission to scribble this little and truly embarrassing, it really felt like a dirty drawing. And then when I look back, years later, and I started putting together slideshows, that's when I realized it was significant. That's when I started looking back at moments in my life and realizing, oh, that was like before touch drawing, that was like part of it. And it was took more time to even realize it was significant. I didn't think of that at the first time I did touch drawing, like, oh, I remember when I did the scribbles and now I'm touch drawing faces. Years later, I'm going, oh, wow, there's some order here. There's this natural unfoldment that was happening and is continuing to happen. So trust the process is the thing. Trust the process, whether it looks like something or not.
Yeah, and whether it's your lifelong process or this one drawing that you're working on.
Exactly. It's a meta and a, mini or whatever, micro and meta process. And that's where I think the arts are a powerful and safe place to explore trusting our process. That's why if we get so caught up in the product too quickly, we don't take advantage of the safety of being able to make mistakes. It's a lot safer to make mistakes, whatever that means, on a piece of paper than in a relationship with somebody or in a car while you're driving, or it's a safe place to just let it all hang out and be open to what wants to emerge and have it not always be perfect.
Yeah. I love how articulate you are about this stuff. It's so cool. I love hearing it.
Oh, good. Well, thank you for your great wanting it, wanting that content, Yeah.
So you talked a little bit already about facilitating workshops, and I noticed being in one of your workshops that your facilitation style is really open is not the right word, non-directive, and that you hardly give instruction, you hardly give feedback about people's stuff. What are the values or guiding principles behind facilitating that way?
I think of my facilitating as holding space for people rather than directing them. So my priority is to create a safe container in which people can trust their own process. So if I'm too directive, they'll be relying on my directing of their process, and it seems to have worked because I see people finding and trusting themselves in this creative process. So everything that I do in a workshop is orienting towards creating that safe container. And it's subtle, and it's energy work, and it's spiritual work, really. I mean, it's, when I invite the spirit of touch drawing, which I do more and more minimally on a verbal level, I sense and feel that there is a subtle presence that comes and joins us and helps guide and support the process. And when I'm playing music, I'm sort of like helping to hold this field. So we're in this sacred field, like this bubble, energetic bubble together, and in that space, I'll occasionally offer a suggestion, and I think a lot of times people don't even hear it, because the best thing is if someone can have that same original experience that I had. No one was guiding me.
Yeah.
So if I say now, so I less and less direct. I used to guide the sessions more earlier on. I've been teaching a long time. Oh, you might want to draw faces. Now you might want to feel this. Now feel your body this way. Now do that. I used to do more of that, and now I demonstrate those possibilities. But while we're drawing, I less and less want to guide it so people can have their original creative experience themselves. And it might be different from what I would have guided them into.
Right.
But
then they get to be them instead of you.
That's the whole idea of it. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's the most beautiful sacred space to me to be there and to be creating music and feeling the liveness of the field and looking around all these people that are just lost to the room. They're inside their own journey. It is the most beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And the sounds, you know, there's rolling, there's scratching, there's paper sounds, this beautiful sound, and they're not paying attention to each other, and they're not thinking, what's Deborah going to think coming over making comments, because that brings up all that stuff about the art teacher and am I doing it right? And, you know, and I know there are some facilitators who facilitate process painting who have developed a kind of expertise in maybe asking the right questions to someone to help them through their process. And I totally honor that's their skill set. That's the skill that I have developed. I don't tell people we're going to draw an hour and a half because they'll look at their clock 7 minutes into it and think, oh God, you mean really keep doing this all that time? Seriously.
Yeah.
But if I don't talk about the amount of time, and then at the end they'll say, oh, you're kidding, it was that long? Something happens between that 7 minutes into it and they go like, how much longer am I have to do it? And then they drop in. And then time disappears and they're in this inner dialogue. It's like this inner mirror that they're engaging with. And so I trust that now.
Yeah.
I just trust it because, so it's me trusting the people who've come to the workshops. That they don't need me to tell them how to have an experience. And my skill that I've developed is to create a safe place that supports people to trust themselves.
Yeah.
I do less sharing with partners. I used to always have witnessing with a partner after the first session, but that brings up all those things again.
Right.
Of like, oh, and people saying, oh, I like that one, and all that way of talking.
Pretty.
I know, and oh, and that person really did it well, and mine just looked like scribbles, and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'm more likely now to have people write where they're drawing, so they have the private time and learn to value their own inner experience. So that's the evolution in and maybe later, once we've gotten further in longer workshops, we'll do witnessing with a partner, but people are more established. In their own process before we do that. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's possible to put into words, but what are you doing energetically to hold space? What's happening for you while you're holding space?
Well, the first thing is always, when I open the group, I always play my chimes. And I feel like I work with sound as a bridge to the subtle realms, if we're going to get into that level of things. And I feel like now, even though I have all these other fancier things like my crystal bowls, I still need my chimes because I feel like the spirit of touch drawing hears them and knows that calls. It's like any shamanic thing. They're my instrument. And when I play them, the spirits come. You know, I set the intention, I request them, I invite the holding protective spirit of the process, and then I do feel the music actually attracts them. You know, it's that bridge through the subtle. And I remember the first time I ever invited the spirit of touch drawing in, and it was in a teepee on Whitby Institute land. So I was doing workshops there before they ever had that big building. And there was a teepee at this point. It's the only time I ever did a workshop at a teepee. And somehow it came to me to, you know, ask these guiding spirits to come be with us. And I felt a different coherence in the field. It was something different. And I felt like people went deeper. So that's a subtle sense, you know. And then, again, using the music. So music is my vehicle for holding space. And then I'll go to the drum while people are drawing, and we know that there's connections around drum beats and consciousness. Even though I don't do it in the formal shamanic journey way, I feel the pulse of the drum creating a certain field and a certain kind of singing. And then I listen for transition points where we've moved to, it feels like the space has gotten more rarefied. People have moved to a certain place, and I listen for that moment where it's right to transition into the bowls. So I'm sort of listening to the field. As people go deeper, I shift the sound, and I'm almost following where they are going to shift the sound and support further. They're going into those spaces. And you know, I will I don't get specific things with different people, but I'll just be sort of kind of inviting, you know, whatever supportive spirits there are, people's own, because I also always invite people to have whatever their own guidance system is.
Yeah.
I try to language it really universally. So if someone thinks they have an inner guide, great. If it's God, if it's, you know, whatever it is for people, I try to create universal language. So whatever is for you, your support, inner support, we invite that. So the feeling in the room is that people's souls are more accessible to a greater presence of who they are in that field. So I'm upholding that while I hold space. That's sort of what I'm doing. Which no one has ever asked. So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I know, it's something that it's not about not being aware of what you're doing. It's like not ever having to put into words what you're doing.
So I am aware of it, but I don't want to sound too woo-woo, you know. So I try not to make a big point of it. I mean, I do workshops in, you know, therapy conferences and things like that where I wouldn't make a big point of it, but I think people do feel it.
Yeah.
They feel their souls more fully, and there is this beauty, and you know, this happens in a lot of creative processes where people, through opening to creative energy, their soul is actually invited to come more fully into their being. That's what I feel like is happening through the creative process, and that's why it's healing.
Yeah.
Their souls, there's more space for their souls to come into embodiment.
Well, my next question was, what's the relationship between creativity and healing? And that really answers it.
Yeah, I think so.
Being more fully embodied, and that soul part of yourself being more fully embodied.
Yeah, and the freedom of the creative process, when we do it as a creative process, can break some of the stuck places, you know, that were maybe blocked in our energy, and that enables that to come. So it's both destructive and creative. You know, the destructive aspect of creativity, where you kind of let it out, breaks down some of the, you know, like as you're clearing your arteries out, you're making more space, and then these new forms can come in. You're making yourself more fluid, so the form of your soul is more able to come into the form of your body and be more unified, more fully integrated. Yeah.
I love that.
Good. Yeah, and that's universal for creative process when it's being held that way. But we know the arts in our culture are so much about the way they're taught, you know, be successful and famous and this and that, and people doing that may not have that kind of freedom to explore it at that level. So, I mean, that's where I do feel like the expressive arts therapy movement is bringing creativity back into our culture in a healthy way. And that's why I'm grateful that that movement also does acknowledge the power of artists, and everyone involved in that movement does not need to be an actual therapist, that there is a value held for the whole range of ways people approach it.
Thanks for watching, and remember to like, share, and subscribe. We want as many people as possible to find out about the inspiring artists who come on Art Kitchen. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/MoGoldenVideos, and you can support the project at patreon.com/Mo.